I'm Ariana, 32 years old, a financial manager at an investment firm in Portland. I live by myself in a modest apartment near Forest Park, simple, yet organized, much like my personality. Precise, direct, and always dependable, especially regarding family. Since I graduated from college, I've essentially carried the burden for my parents. They still reside in a two-story home in Salem, where I was raised. Though their jobs never brought in much income, I never allowed them to go without. When my mother required back surgery, I paid the entire medical expense. When the house began deteriorating due to decaying pipes, I hired professionals and personally spent over $8,000. Each month, I consistently transferred $1,200 to assist with their mortgage and day-to-day costs. Initially, I believed it was simply the right thing to do, children supporting their parents when needed. But gradually, I began to notice something I had long tried to ignore. My younger brother Brandon is 4 years my junior. He has no college degree, no steady employment, never financially self-reliant. While I spent 10-hour days working, Brandon lounged at home watching TV, scrolling on his phone, then going out with his friends in the evenings. Some months, my mom would call to say, "Brandon's wallet was stolen. Can you send extra funds?" I never questioned it. I just sent more like a machine. But oddly enough, his wallet seemed to get stolen at least once every year. By the fourth time, I found it more ridiculous than sad. I never once saw Brandon hold down a real job. When he turned 25, he opened a vintage clothing shop. I invested the initial $10,000 and even helped him write a business plan. A year later, the store closed. All he said was, "Guess I'm not cut out for business." After that, he moved back in with our parents rent-free, like it was perfectly normal. Still, I never heard a single objection from mom or dad. Whenever I called, mom would say gently, "He's trying. He just needs more time." More time? He was 28. I had spent my entire adulthood working, saving, and supporting the family, while Brandon just needed more time. I started to feel drained. After long, stressful days, I would sit in my apartment, staring at the auto-transfer reminders on my phone, heart heavy. It wasn't the money I regretted. It was the sacrifice. The weekends I skipped outings with friends to fix their roof, while Brandon stayed in his room playing video games. The birthdays where it was just me, a cake I bought myself, and a lonely candle. Meanwhile, Brandon had backyard BBQs, despite doing nothing all year. I kept telling myself, they don't mean it. But deep down, I knew they preferred him. Brandon was the baby, the golden boy. Mom always spoke to him in the softest voice, while I was simply his sister, the responsible one. Whenever I voiced my exhaustion and said, "Mom, I need some care too," she would respond, "You're strong, Ariana. You don't need anyone to worry about you." Sure, I didn't need to be worried over. But that didn't mean I deserved to be neglected. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like a ghost lingering behind the family, only visible when they required money, repairs, or someone to clean up a mess. As for affection, gratitude, or even a hug, I couldn't recall the last time I received any. Still, I continued sending money, continued getting lukewarm, "thank you" texts, continued staying silent as I watched Brandon flaunt designer shoes on Instagram with the caption, "Gifted by someone special." Someone special? Was that me? I thought I had grown used to it. But in reality, I had just been bottling it all up. Then, one day, a seemingly minor moment shattered everything. A truth I never expected, hidden behind gentle words and fake responsibilities, forced me to finally ask, what am I to this family? I didn't know whether the heartbreak or the fury would hit harder, but I knew one thing. I would no longer stay silent. It happened on a gloomy, damp Saturday afternoon, almost as if the weather itself was trying to warn me. I drove from Portland to Salem to assist my parents with some banking documents. They said they needed me to review a few mortgage-related papers. I was so used to signing and representing them legally that I didn't think twice. Mom welcomed me at the door with a glass of iced tea, smiling faintly and gesturing toward a stack of papers on the living room table. "Can you check these for me, honey? I can't understand them," she said, like always, trusting and unaware. I sat down, pulled out my laptop, and opened the neatly clipped folder. Most of it consisted of bank forms, utility statements, and old tax records. But then I saw another thinner pile, marked with a blue tab. Typed neatly on the cover, "Last Will and Testament, Stephen and Marlene Bennett." I froze. A will? Curiosity, or perhaps self-preservation, made me open it. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Perhaps a line recognizing all my silent sacrifices. Maybe a small sign of fairness. But what I found was ruthlessly clear. We leave all assets, including the house in Salem, savings accounts, life insurance, and land holdings, to our son, Brandon Bennett. I reread the line repeatedly, praying my eyes were mistaken. But no. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even a partial share. Not even a brief word of acknowledgement, except for one lonely line at the end. "We love both our children equally, but believe this is necessary for the family's stability." Love equally? They showed their love by letting me shoulder their bills while Brandon inherited everything? A chill crept down my spine. The room seemed to shift. All those years of pushing myself to the brink, sleepless nights worrying about Mom's health, cutting back on my own expenses just to send money home, wiped away with a single line that called it necessary. They didn't truly see me. They only saw a daughter capable of carrying burdens, so they kept piling them on. I sat there for what felt like forever, frozen in place, until Mom's voice rang out from the kitchen. "Ariana, did you find the bank document?" I stood up, grabbed the will, and walked straight into the kitchen. She was rinsing vegetables, her hands trembling slightly from the cold water. I held up the papers at her eye level. "When did you write this?" I asked. Mom glanced over, and I caught a brief flicker of panic in her eyes, but she quickly concealed it and replied, "Oh, that? It's been some time. Your father, and I just wanted to have everything in order. I thought you already knew." I didn't say a word. She set the vegetables aside, dried her hands, and spoke more gently. "Ariana, you have a stable career, your own place, a good job. Brandon, he's still trying to find his footing. We just want to give him a leg up." I let out a laugh, not because it was amusing, but because I couldn't contain it anymore. "His footing? He doesn't even need to stand up, Mom. You're literally giving him the entire house to lie down in." She opened her mouth, likely to defend herself, but I raised my hand. "Don't. I understand perfectly now." I walked out of the kitchen and headed toward the front door. Dad was outside changing a light bulb on the porch. He looked up and smiled. "Leaving already? Stay for dinner." I stared at him for a moment, then held up the papers. "Did you sign this?" He followed my gaze, and his face went rigid. Yeah, I did, but..." "There's no need to explain. I've read it. It's very clear." I stepped off the porch, my voice low. "I came here to help you with paperwork. Now I see where I truly stand." "Ariana, don't misunderstand," he called after me. I turned and met his eyes. "I'm not misunderstanding anything. I understand exactly." Then I got into my car and shut the door. The engine started, but inside I felt frozen. Sometimes, becoming an outsider doesn't happen because someone pushes you away. It happens the moment you stay silent for too long. I got back to Portland around 9 in the evening, just as the rain began. Everything inside me felt numb. No raindrop could rival the chill of realizing you've been cast aside by your own family. I sat in my car for a long while, gripping the steering wheel. I should have been angry, should have cried, screamed even. But all I felt was emptiness. The following morning, I couldn't concentrate on anything. The image of the will, the phrase "believe this is necessary," and my mother's guilty smile kept replaying in my mind. By midday, I decided to call her. I couldn't just let it slide as if I were some distant visitor in their lives. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Ariana, I was just about to call you." "Mom, I need to talk." "Seriously. No sugar ko ating." There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "All right. Go ahead." I forced my voice to remain steady. "Why? Why leave everything to Brandon? Were you planning to wait until I was completely drained before telling me the truth?" Mom replied slowly, cautiously. "It's not what you think. Your father, and I considered it carefully. You're stable. You're strong, independent. Brandon, he needs assistance. I let out a dry laugh. Help? Mom. Brandon doesn't need help. He needs a reality check. He lives like the world owes him everything. Her voice turned sharper. He's your brother, Ariana. Don't speak about him that way. I cut her off.
No.
He's the one who hasn't earned $1 in 10 years, yet still gets treated like a poor victim. And me? Every time I sent money, all I got was, "Thank you. I'll pay you back soon."
But, you know what?
Not once did you ever repay me, because you knew I wouldn't ask. I heard her breathing heavier on the other end.
I'm sorry.
I didn't realize it hurt you so much. You didn't think. That's the issue, Mom. No one in this family ever thought about me. I was just the go-to person. Roof leaking? Call Ariana. Power bill overdue? Call Ariana. Brandon's business flopped? Ariana will cover it. But when it came time to divide the assets, oh, right. She's fine on her own. Her voice trembled. Do you know why we chose to do it that way? I remained silent. Because I was scared you'd leave us. I feared if we gave you a share, Brandon would resent us, and you'd never come back. You were already living far away, so I made the choice to keep Brandon close, even knowing it wasn't fair. I gripped the phone tightly. You didn't lose me because I moved away. You lost me because you never really held on to me.
She sobbed. I'm sorry, Ayana.
I just wanted to keep the peace. By erasing me from the family? By turning me into a walking wallet? I didn't wait for a response. Did you know I stayed up nights worrying you wouldn't have enough for retirement? I even looked into buying additional insurance for both of you. But now, I think Brandon can handle that, since the house and the future belong to him. I hung up. My heart pounded. My hands were ice cold. I thought I'd feel relief, but instead, there was only sorrow. A sadness so deep it made it hard to breathe. Sadness that even as an adult, I still clung to the hope that my parents would treat me equally. Sadness that the one they always protected had never once stood up for anyone but himself. I opened my laptop, logged into my bank account, and canceled the automatic transfers to my parents. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I opened a new Excel sheet and began listing every amount I'd sent over the past 7 years, not to demand it back, but to remind myself I had done enough. More than enough. I'm not heartless. But I refuse to keep being the only one who cares in a relationship that only goes one way. And if they believe Brandon deserves everything, then now they can live with that decision, without me around to fix the mess. A week after that final conversation with Mom, I still hadn't received a single word from them.
Good.
I needed some distance, to breathe, to adjust to the feeling of no longer being bound by unseen demands and unspoken duties. But that silence didn't last long. On Monday morning, as I was preparing for a regional director meeting, my phone buzzed. A message from Dad. Ariana, the property tax is due. Can you cover it like you always do?
No greeting.
No, how are you? Just another cold, familiar request. I stared at the screen, feeling a bitter blend of sadness and disbelief. They genuinely thought I was still the same old Ariana, the one who'd open her wallet no matter how wounded she was. I typed back without hesitation. I think Brandon can handle it. The house is his now. Less than 5 minutes later, Mom called. I let it ring. She called again. Then came a text. Ariana, don't do this. You know we don't have enough. Brandon is still looking for a job. Don't let a small misunderstanding destroy this family. Small misunderstanding. I bit my lip, bracing myself, then responded. Mom, this isn't a misunderstanding. You and Dad made a conscious choice. I'm just honoring it. If Brandon deserves everything, then it's time he starts carrying some of the weight too. This time, it wasn't until that evening that I got a reply, this one from Brandon. Are you seriously going to turn your back on them over a piece of paper? I almost laughed. A piece of paper. That's what they called the cold judgment passed down after years of sacrifice. I didn't answer right away. I waited until after work, then wrote back. It's not about the paper. It's about never truly being part of this family. At least now I'm finally free. Brandon replied almost instantly. It was clear he'd been waiting. You're so selfish. Family means sticking together through hard times. I typed every word like chiseling it into stone. Family means sharing, not taking advantage. I've carried everything alone for too long. Now it's your turn to understand what hard times feel like. That night, I received no further messages from Brandon, but I knew it wasn't over. 3 days later, I got an email from the bank. My secondary account in Salem, the one my parents had access to, had an attempted withdrawal that exceeded the limit. I immediately contacted the bank, closed the account, and revoked all permissions. I had originally opened that account to make supporting them easier. Now there was no reason for it to exist. Right after I hung up, Dad's number appeared on my phone. I didn't pick up. Then came a text. You really want us to lose the house? You won't be able to live with yourself. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. No one's losing anything, Dad. Now you'll just have to handle it yourselves. I'm not a bank. And I'm no longer the daughter expected to choose between love and manipulated gratitude. The final message of the day came from Mom. A short, heavy sentence. We're disappointed in you. I took a deep breath and unlocked my phone. For the first time in years, I chose to stand on my own, not out of guilt, not from obligation, not for anyone else. I used to think cutting ties would leave a void, but it didn't. I felt free. It wasn't that I stopped loving them, it was that I finally loved myself enough to stop letting them treat me like I didn't matter. 3 days after ending all contact and shutting down the Salem account, my apartment doorbell rang early Saturday morning. Before I could even check the peephole, the knocking started, loud, forceful, more like a creditor than a family visit. I looked through the lens. It was my mom. Beside her stood my dad, and unsurprisingly, Brandon too, his hands shoved in his pockets, face twisted like he was the one wronged. I stood frozen, my heart pounding. They had come all the way here. No call. No notice. Just appeared, as if I still owed them something. I didn't open the door, but when Mom started speaking through the small gap, her voice soaked in familiar theatrics, I knew they wouldn't leave quietly. Ariana, I know you're in there. I don't want to make a scene, but you're tearing this family apart. I answered through the door, firm and clear. Mom, this isn't the time or the place. I don't want to talk. Please go. Dad's voice followed, heavy like he'd been carrying a load uphill. You're really going to ignore your parents after everything we've done for you? I swallowed my anger and kept my tone even. You chose Brandon. Now I'm choosing myself. Mom banged harder, her fake calm vanishing. Don't be so selfish. Family is about sharing the weight, Ariana. Weren't you always the considerate one? I opened the door, not to argue, just because I was done hiding. They stood there in a neat line, Mom with her arms crossed in disapproval, Dad looking downward like he was scheming, and Brandon smirking like he was watching a second-rate soap opera. I folded my arms and blocked the doorway. All right. Since you went to all this trouble, listen closely. Mom jumped in before I could finish. Oh, you listen? Your father's blood pressure is unstable. The house needs urgent repairs. Brandon's applying everywhere. You just need to help out for a few more months. Just a few months. I nodded slowly. Just like the few months last year? Or the year before that? Or when you promised Brandon would be self-sufficient by age 25. He's 28. Now Mom was still freeloading, still the one needing help. Brandon snapped. I never asked you to do anything. Mom and Dad made those choices, it wasn't me. I stared him down. No, you didn't have to ask, because you knew someone else would carry the burden for you. Dad stepped forward. Ariana, you're acting like a stranger. When families have issues, they sit down and sort them out. You can't throw everything away over a will. I took half a step back, breathing deeply. I'm not throwing anything away. The will already ended it. I'm just done being the only one pouring money and energy into a so-called family that only remembers me when they need rescuing. Mom reached for my sleeve, her eyes brimming with tears. You're my daughter, Ariana. I don't want to lose you over money. I gently but firmly pulled away. You didn't lose me over money. You lost me when you chose Brandon. The one who never took responsibility is the one you trusted with the entire future, while the one who carried the load for 10 years, was erased from the picture. I looked each of them in the eye, my voice low and steady. I was never really part of this family to you. I was just a walking wallet. Brandon's face turned red as he looked away. Mom stood frozen. Dad clenched his jaw like he was biting down on glass. I stepped back inside my apartment, holding the door open just enough. If any of you still believe I'm going to change my mind, you can leave now. I'm no longer your silent shadow. I closed the door gently, no slamming, no goodbye. The silence that followed was the perfect ending. I leaned against the door, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but because I knew I had just severed something that had tied me down my entire life, guilt disguised as familial love. I thought the confrontation at my doorstep would be the end, that they would back off, nurse their wounded pride, maybe even reflect. But I had given them too much credit. Early one morning, as I was sipping coffee, a text from Madison, my best friend from college, now working as a lawyer in Seattle, lit up my screen. Are you okay? I just saw something your mom posted on Facebook. I frowned, picked up my phone, and logged into my old Facebook account, which I kept only to stay in touch with a few people. On my mother's page was a post that had been shared over 40 times. It's heartbreaking as parents to watch your own child turn their back on you over money. We sacrificed our lives for her, and now, when we need her most, she coldly cuts us off. Our home is on the verge of foreclosure, but she's too busy enjoying her luxurious life to care. I read it again and again, each word weighing more than the last. The comments were worse. Kids these days have no respect. If my child ever did that, I'd be heartbroken. How could anyone be so heartless to parents who gave them everything? Brandon had shared it too, adding his own line. Family is about love, not math. I'm not perfect, but I never turned my back when they needed me. Then Dad posted a short, passive-aggressive status, tagging me directly. Some people think success means forgetting where they came from. It's only when we're old and weak that we realize not every child we raised is truly ours. I put my phone down on the table. After a long pause, I let out a dry, bitter laugh. They had turned me into the villain, the ungrateful daughter who tossed her parents aside. None of the dozens of commenters knew I had been the one keeping that house afloat for the past decade, sacrificing quietly. I opened my laptop, logged into Facebook, my hands trembling slightly, but my eyes clear. If they had chosen to tell only half the story, then I would tell the part they had left out, the part one had been silent about my entire youth. I began typing. I never imagined I'd post something like this. But since my family has chosen to share only their side and paint me as the villain, here's the truth. I'm the eldest daughter of Stephen and Marlene Bennett. I've been financially supporting my parents since I was 23, right after I received my first paycheck. I cover mortgage payments, hospital bills, utility costs, and home repairs. I never asked for thanks. I did it because I believed that's what children are supposed to do. Meanwhile, my brother Brandon never held a stable job. While I worked overtime to send money home, he lived without responsibility or pressure. My parents knew this, but never corrected it. Instead, they said, "You're the capable one, help him out." And I did, for years in silence. Until I found out they left everything, the house, the savings, the insurance, to him in their will. I wasn't even mentioned, except for one line saying they loved both of us equally. A hollow sentence for someone who carried everything without complaint. I don't hate them for leaving their assets to Brandon. I just refuse to keep playing the role of the invisible provider. I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped letting myself be used. If anyone reading this still believes I'm ungrateful, imagine being in my shoes. You can give. You can sacrifice. But would you be okay with being treated like nothing more than a bank account forever? I hit post, then closed my laptop. I poured myself a glass of water and sat quietly. Messages started flooding in from friends and relatives. One aunt messaged, "Your post made me cry." I saw it all, but I was too afraid to say anything. A high school friend messaged, "Finally, someone said what so many of us have been through." I didn't need their defense. I simply felt the strength of my own voice. Not to argue, but to end the silence that had allowed others to assume my sacrifices were effortless. If they chose to share only their side of the story, then I would reveal the part they refused to acknowledge, the truth I had carried alone for so many years. My post circulated more quickly than I imagined. People I hadn't spoken to in years were among the first to reach out. A former coworker messaged, "I was the reliable child too. Thank you for voicing what so many of us have been too scared to admit." A distant cousin wrote a long message saying she had noticed the favoritism in my family for years but stayed quiet, afraid of being called nosy. Several old high school friends sent encouraging messages saying they were proud of me for speaking up. Meanwhile, my parents kept posting vague and sentimental messages. My father wrote, "We lost the daughter who used to be our pride," all because she got too caught up in her success to remember where she came from. My mother shared an old photograph of the three of us, captioned, "Some things only remain in memories. We forgive, but we don't forget." As for Brandon, he wrote, "Family should be a space for forgiveness, not for keeping track. It's sad when some people see only numbers instead of love." I didn't reply. I no longer felt the need to, not out of bitterness, but because I no longer craved their recognition. The truth was out. Those who wanted to understand would. And those who chose to believe their version of events could continue doing so. I didn't make any more posts. No counters, no explanations, just silence. But this wasn't the old silence. Not the silence of wounded resignation. This was a peaceful, grounded quiet, the kind that comes when you finally free yourself from a role you never chose. A month later, I moved into a new apartment. It was smaller and located near the Willamette River. It wasn't luxurious, but the windows faced east and caught the morning light beautifully. The gentle sound of water helped me sleep peacefully each night. I also began writing again, something I hadn't done in nearly 10 years. Life had buried it under spreadsheets, financial statements, and everyone else's emergencies. Now, on evenings without urgent phone calls or desperate pleas for money, I sat at my desk and wrote about silence, discomfort, and the art of letting go. I started saying no. No to the things that drained me, from unnecessary social commitments to relationships that only showed up when they needed something. I stopped being afraid of the word selfish. I had lived far too long under a warped definition of generosity. Now, I chose to love myself. I kept a few long-standing friendships, the ones that had stood by me when all I had was responsibility. We'd meet on weekends, take walks through the park, and talk about simple things. Things that had nothing to do with money or family expectations. And strangely, I felt lighter. One evening in late autumn, while walking along the river, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. I paused, then answered. "Ariana." I recognized the voice immediately. It was my mother. She was silent for a few seconds, then said softly, "I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just want to know, are you okay?" I didn't respond right away. A part of me softened at her words, but I knew forgiveness took time. Trust didn't come back with a single phone call. I answered gently, "I'm doing well, Mom. But I need to live my own life, not as someone else's backup plan. Not as the one who always carries the load." There were no arguments, no defensiveness. Just a quiet, "I understand." I didn't say, "I forgive you." But I also didn't hang up. I listened. And sometimes, that's enough, to realize that the pain isn't as sharp as it once was. When the call ended, I looked out at the river. The lights shimmered across the water like memories being released. I knew I still had healing left to do, with myself, with my past, but now I would no longer move forward on shaky legs, burdened by guilt. I would move ahead with the steady stride of someone who knows they are worthy of love, genuine, unconditional love. My story isn't only about favoritism or a will. It's about reclaiming self-worth after years of being cast in the role of the responsible child. I realized that true love between parent and child doesn't demand endless sacrifice. And real family doesn't require you to give up your freedom. By releasing the role that was forced upon me, I found peace. And I finally learned to love myself, keeping only those relationships built on mutual respect, not draining obligation. What do you think about Ariana's decision? Was she too harsh, or was it what she truly needed to find herself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more real, heartfelt stories about family and life.